Well, good evening here on WPRI.com, the Dan York State of Mind commentary. In lieu of our original shows, we have some archive shows this week at 7:30 on MyRI TV and Fox Providence at midnight. Kind of some throwback moments where we have some local celebrities and storytellers. So hope you enjoy those programs, and we'll be back whenever we get the green light, and we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, a bunch of things happening in the news today. The governor announced what she calls the outline for phase one reopening for May 8th. Let me just click this on to make sure I know what I'm talking about here. Phase one, testing the water, she calls it, where some parks will begin to reopen with strong social distancing guidelines. Elective medical procedures resume under new safety protocols. Primary and community health providers remain open. Some limited child care, retail locations with pickup orders, and maybe some browsing of some kind. Offices, for the most part, need to remain remote. So if you've been working from home, she's asking you to do that still. Pilot openings of hair salons and barbers. Not exactly sure how that goes or what that means. Restaurants remain open for pickup, delivery, and drive-through, with maybe modest expansions of their operations, including some testing of outdoor activity. Anyway, it's a crapshoot, and of course, in order to move to the next phase, we have to have 14 days of flattened or diminished numbers, or the hospital numbers have got to be good. All of that. So that is part of what we're dealing with here with the phase one. When asked what the 14-day quarantine rule is for crossing the state line, in context of all this, the governor didn't have an answer. But as she began to riff, she thought, don't count on and don't be thinking about being able to leave the state and come back without quarantining. That's not good. I mean, at some juncture, she's going to have to get serious about evaluating that situation. Now, I understand Massachusetts has been chalk heavy in COVID-19, and Connecticut in certain pockets real bad too, especially as you get closer to the tri-state area. But there are a lot of folks who need to cross this state line on a regular or at least one-time basis without having to have the worry of quarantining for 14 days. Yours truly included. We've got family in Massachusetts that we're dying to see, elderly loved ones who, need some company. We also have, I will tell you, just I got to pick up a bunch of stuff in Connecticut. I'll leave the details to the radio show. Won't bother you with them. But I got a bunch of things I got to go get in Connecticut soon, in the next couple, 3 weeks. And so if I do so, I'm going to be locked down, even after taking the proper precautions. You have your own examples. Here's the other thing. The governor's enforcement or even awareness about enforcement on this matter is not consistent. I learned over the weekend that local marinas in Rhode Island have plenty of out-of-state plates there, including Massachusetts. Now, maybe some people have come in a quarantine and done their whole thing, but for the most part, I would say most mass boat owners are from Massachusetts. Now, social distancing is hard in marinas because the slips are close and so are the boats, but I'm sure you can figure that part out. But let me ask you this. Why are members of marinas who happen to dwell in Massachusetts allowed to come in and play with their boats and get them in the water, maybe have a little picnic or social time, and Massachusetts golfers who belong to Rhode Island clubs aren't allowed? Why is that? Does that make any sense to you? It doesn't make any sense to me. And it's just part of what are the holes in this administration's enforcement of some of these regulations. And it really isn't about the governor not being competent in her own lane, but the governor has been really subpar in delegation and showing the width and breadth of her administration. Small business is in desperate need for a whole bunch of stuff, financially and legislatively. And we barely see the Commerce Secretary, who's working so hard, she said. He stood there kind of, hanging out at her press conference today. Last week, the education commissioner got about 5 minutes of presentation time compared to the governor, more or less telling everybody what her show is all about. Other than the Department of Health director, these early afternoon briefings the governor does are chock full of her. And what she doesn't seem to understand is that leadership is about delegation and that she'll look stronger, not weaker, in providing a whole lot more people who, by the way, are paid by taxpayer dollars to be accountable to us directly. The Commissioner of Education is responsible to us directly. The Commerce Secretary is responsible to us directly. The Department of Health Director, who we do see, is responsible to us directly. The DEM Director is responsible to us directly. I think you get the point, right? The other thing is we need a czar for the Latinx community. I mean, right now, we've got a serious imbalance in COVID disease in that community. And in part, many folks in the Hispanic community are saying, well, it's because we got a language barrier and a lot of people didn't understand. Well, okay. Well, let's get a czar there. The director of administration, Brett Smiley, admitted on Latino radio in the last few working days that the administration fell down, my words, but didn't get the job done. Where's the briefing for the Hispanic community at these briefings? Do we just rely on Latino radio to get that done, or are we treating them like part of the society that, by the way, the COVID-19 virus doesn't discern between? The COVID-19 virus doesn't seem to care if you speak Spanish or English. But if that part of the community is having serious problems, it affects everybody and the total macro economy. Look, part of this is because the governor refuses to acknowledge that she needs to be challenged. Being challenged makes you better. That the journalists in this community and the media in this community have more or less laid down on this. This is not the first time, by the way, on this in my radio forum on WPRO weekdays 3 to 6 that I have opined on this. I will never forget this time for all sorts of reasons, but primarily I will never forget that the journalistic community laid down for this governor and didn't challenge her for the kind of interactive forums that she needs to be tested in every single day. Democracy goes away when journalism is wounded, or when both are wounded, or either are wounded. Everything is wounded. It's just, it's shocking. It's shocking. And I may be on a dartboard for a lot of our journalists here, most of whom I respect tremendously, and they know that. I want to see them get their work done. I want to see them supported by the folks who need to support them, to put it to the governor. Without their great work, this state's suffering, not just from COVID-19, but the response to it. And notwithstanding the 80% approval numbers that the governor is getting when asked, do you think the governor's doing a good job? Because she has, and helped to slowing the curve. But there's so much more that needs to be done, and so much more that this administration is responsible for, by office and by person. Lastly, Christina Paxson, the Brown University president, penned off an op-ed in the New York Times this past weekend saying that we've got to be open for campuses in September, that the fall semester has got to be green-lighted with all sorts of challenges, restrictions, containment, testing, all of that. She says many college campuses will be under and done and fail, and that's true. That is true. Those schools without big endowments are going to have an uphill climb, if at all. I support that concept. And the governor today said that she's going to ask for collegiate reports on preparation for being open. We ought to get to that toot sweet, because that's an economic issue as well as an education issue and a quality of life normalcy issue. We're not going to get big crowds and big stadiums for football games or any of that kind of thing. If you think we are, we're not. But we could have campuses operating in semi-normal ways, which will be one more step to advancing our cause, economically, educationally, psychologically, and all that kind of thing. Listen, you have a great evening, and wish for the sun to shine. I think it will, starting middle of the week. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, Wash your hands. Try not to touch your face. Be nice and say a lot of prayers.